This podcast is distributed for general informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to constitute legal, tax, accounting, or investment advice. The information, opinions, and views contained herein are our own and may be subject to change at any time without prior notice. We do not have any obligation to provide revised opinions in the event of changed circumstances. All investment strategies and investments involve risk of loss. Nothing contained in this website should be construed as investment advice. Any reference to an investment's past or potential performance is not and should not be construed as a recommendation or as a guarantee of any specific outcome or profit. Hey, everybody. We're back. It's Jeremy Wynn and Nathan Harper with Venue Ventures.
Hello, everybody.
And today we're going to talk about something that Ray Dalio said and kind of made famous was cash is trash. Or is it?
Yeah, you just have to kind of look at, and kind of what brings us up is where we're progressing towards, or at least where we feel like we're progressing towards, or personally I feel like we're progressing towards as a society of the government is wanting to get us to, a 3% inflationary rate, net inflation, and we're not getting anywhere close, even though they've been running the printing presses since, March? More or less.
They were running it before then, but really running them.
Yeah,
really running them in March.
$6 trillion of just running the printing press, more or less, and we're progressing into this year of additional potential for running the printing press. It's one of those things where how do you keep pace with that type of inflationary measures that are put out there? And part of that comes back to if you just took all of the cash that you had and buried it outside, the value of that $1,000 that you buried outside doesn't grow over time. Everybody knows that. But that is where the idea, at least in my mind, comes that cash is trash, is that when you hold cash as having a store value that's more than what the face dollar amount is on it, it doesn't necessarily translate to 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now.
Right, meaning your $1, what can it buy?
Exactly.
The classic is, what does a gallon of milk cost?
Or what does a decent home cost? I mean, you could even extrapolate that out to a lot of varying factors, and it's, as time goes on, we only see that exaggerated in our day-to-day lives of, what does a gallon of milk cost? It's been pretty stagnant, I want to say, but I don't think that's necessarily accurate there. That's projecting what the market price is going to be for a gallon of gas or a gallon of milk. But I think with the government subsidies on milk purchases, for the most part, you can look at it being pretty stable throughout history, the overall price of milk. If you were a dairy farmer, you're not necessarily making a lot of money just because you're restricted on the overall price. I'm looking at that $1.19 for a gallon of gas there on that picture, or a gallon of milk. And I've paid, depending on what Safeway special has, 99 cents for a gallon of milk, on up to $3 for a gallon of milk. Now that's obviously not your organic, fresh from the teat,
free range.
I
milked it myself.
This is from one of those factories, or however you want to envision it in your mind, one of those places. But U.S. average price of milk per gallon, there in that blue chart. I mean, it's
either way you look at it, it's like we know prices are increasing.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I can tell myself over the year, just this in 2020, I guess we're in a new year, food prices increase. We keep track of what we spend on food pretty well. We go over on a monthly basis, and we could tell without changing our diet or going out to eat, more or less, that we had a significant change in our food bill. Like, it was significant enough that we saw it and we were like, oh, that's interesting. But it wasn't, and that's just N=1 for myself. Obviously, I've heard other people saying the same thing.
Yep.
It comes down to then what he's saying. He's not talking about a gallon of milk and these kind of things. He's talking about your investments, right?
Yep.
So when you have your money sitting in a bank account and it gets 0.5% interest, which is good now, what is that doing in compared to what that dollar is worth, or what you could be doing with that money in something else? anything else comparatively. So that's where I think a lot of the model of my personal investment style has changed over the years, is looking at that as well. And with the advent of a lot of these banks being able to allow you to transfer money pretty quickly in and out between investments, after settlement dates and that kind of stuff, you're less than a week to be able to get that money into your account. So when you look at that, what do you need and why in your bank account to sit there and hold when it could be in something else and very low risk?
Yep.
If you're risk averse, to hedge yourself against the dollar decreasing.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at just gradual progression of, even if you put it in an indexed fund of a S&P or a NASDAQ or even the Dow, you could put them in any of those, and they're actually it would actually be working for you much more than burying it in a mayonnaise jar in your backyard. And so obviously we're in the mindset of you can always invest and make money in the markets, and short term, long term, whatever your time frame horizon is on it. But it's one of those things that you have to answer for yourself, is how do you think to best grow the amount of money that you have in the near term, long term, and what does it look like moving forward? Are the minor changes that happen on a day-to-day basis in comparison to the longer term horizon, is that something that is measurable enough to make you pull out the savings and put it into investments? Or is the fact that you have a savings account or something that's in savings making the 0.5% of growth, which I think is fairly high? I know Ally is about 0.5%, and I think they're one of the higher ones. But if you go to like your major, your Chase, your Wells Fargo, your U.S. Bank, you're getting 0.0001% on your savings account in there. And so in essence, what you're saying is that I just like having the idea of a bank insuring my money up to $250,000, and it's not even the bank insuring your money; it's the federal government insuring your money up to $250,000 to provide that safety or security for you. When in actuality, you can have more flexibility or safety or security by having your money in the markets or whatever avenue you're looking at, if that's BTC or something else along those lines.
So, what are they actually insuring? Your bank gets robbed?
Yeah, so you remember Washington Mutual went out business.
Yeah.
So it's your deposit. It's your federal deposit insurance that you have, and so it's up to that $250,000 that they will guarantee that even if your bank goes up or under and they don't have any money available to give to you, that the federal government will come in and give you that money and insure that money up to that amount. I don't know that it's actually come into play in recent years for any of those major banks. I mean, obviously Chase came in and purchased Washington Mutual to the point where they've avoided having to trigger those types of events for account holders. But I want to say that you look at holdings across the broad scale. I don't know of too many people much anymore that look, or at least for myself personally, I could say I don't really look too much at having money tied up in savings just based off of the return that you get for the savings, for keeping your money housed for the bank. There's not the return that's there. It doesn't make sense to keep that money tied up in that avenue.
When we look at some other large companies or corporations that do house money and are holding a ton of money, you think of somebody like Apple or Berkshire.
Yep.
They've got large reserves that are sitting there. In a sense like that, why aren't they investing into something else? What is it that they are looking to do with that cash? They've been sitting on it. I know both Apple recently has been taking a lot of loans out. I think they're about 1-to-1 now with cash to debt since interest rates are so low. But Berkshire, I haven't looked at them as much either. I
think they have about $130 billion.
They got a lot, I know. Yeah. What's that mindset on there? Because they're basically the antithesis of what Ray Dalio is saying as well. Like, I'm not a Ray Dalio, what do you want to call him, prophet or whatever you want to say, but I do feel the same way with cash, and I personally don't hold a lot of cash in my bank accounts unless I'm going to be using it. Because, when you say cash is trash, well, you can't buy anything with gold. You can't go out there and take a store. You can't buy hardly anything with Bitcoin. So it's like you have to have cash. So cash is still there. So what are these companies buying, or why are they holding on to it? Is it just the
swoop in potential to buy? Is the only thing I can think of why Berkshire would hold the cash is buying opportunity potential in the future. But I really don't see in the near term horizon that type of buying opportunity similar to what we had with the COVID events of this last March, where there was an excellent opportunity for them to buy, and I don't think they necessarily jumped in as much as they possibly could in that avenue.
Yeah, you can see on the chart here in March. Once they started printing money, it just started slamming it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen. Two things really, right? Printing money and interest rates.
Yeah.
So.
And I think what we're going to see here for the near term is that the interest rates are going to more or less level off for interest rates of like for your lending and that type of stuff. I think we're already seeing some of that play out with, unless they're going to be making some negative interest moves or negative lending moves on the Federal Reserve or central banking system. It's just going to kind of level out at our current levels that we have, 3% for 30-year type of thing, and around the 2s for your 15-year type of mortgages, and that's kind of moving the needle, I think, on the construction and personal finance side for a lot of people. But as far as the overall dollar value, they aren't seeing that inflation like they're wanting to, that 3% that they're wanting to see, and so. As we're seeing that move forward, the value of the dollar, and you alluded to it earlier, it's not like you're going to go to the store and pay in Bitcoin for any type of thing. You wouldn't go to the store and pay in Apple or any other type of major stock or holding along those lines, because it doesn't have the value. It's that currency or that exchange that provides that value for our everyday markets, which, until that point in time where we see, what is it, the DM coin or whatever come into play, that we aren't necessarily going to have that electronic version or the non-tie to the U.S. dollar.
Well, I posted in the Discord the CBDCs, central bank digital coins. So they are testing out a bunch of different digital coins. And why wouldn't they? Ultimately, our system is a digital system anyway. And when you looked at what they were saying is, look, the technology is way better in what's currently out there with Bitcoin and some of these stable coins and altcoins. There's technology out there that's way better than what all these banks are currently using. So why wouldn't they test this out? And they said specifically they don't want to be the first one in, and they don't have to, because the U.S. is the reserve currency, so they don't have to be the first one to test it. All these other countries, which are starting to test their own digital currencies and that type of stuff, those are the testers. Great. What's going wrong? What's going right? We won't see it this year, but within the next 5 years, I would imagine we see something coming about for a central bank digital currency. You have a lot of people are throwing out the Tether FUD, which is a stable coin in the cryptocurrency side. Ultimately, it's just pegged to the U.S. dollar. And, they had a lot of issues because people were worried that they weren't backed 100% for the amount of tethers that they were printing.
Yeah.
Just like our central bank prints. But, they had assets. It's like 70% of the assets. Well, I get it. I understand that too. Why don't they have 100%? Does it really matter in a sense like that when you're looking at how it's being used? But once that FUD came out, or the fear, the uncertainty, the doubt, there was multiple different coins that were USDC. There's Dai coin. There's a bajillion more that came out from that.
Yeah.
So there's use cases, and our governments are seeing that there are use cases. And with that, you're going to see a lot more implementation into the digital currency side, which brings you back to the DM coin.
Yep.
Which, when you think about somebody like Lynn Alden, she's a fund manager, and she's thrown out a ton of stuff in, talking about hedging against the dollar as well. And she's into cryptocurrencies and that kind of stuff. And she's something about the amount of our currencies are becoming more centralized themselves in the world currency. So instead of having, you have your the pound and the dollar and the yen, that they're converging much more together.
Yes.
And this digital currency itself, I think, will do the same thing. If DM coin ever becomes something, that's going to be the mode, like there's so many users on Facebook.
Yeah, the mass adoption type.
The mass adoption is going to really roll it in there. How do they take that away from themselves, the governments? Because if they're going to want is there going to be a world currency? Maybe the DM coin is going to be the world currency, and each other country still has their own internal,
It'd be a way for them to really get it out to the masses potentially, but I don't see them relinquishing their control over being able to have the levers, because they want to be able to have the control of the levers to either devalue or value these overall currencies in short order and see the overall effects in the economies the way that they want to. And you're looking at the graphic here is that the gold price in comparison to the underlying currency, and we can't get the change necessary that they want to in that type of exchange.
They can't print money fast enough.
No, and which is startling considering how much they have printed over the last
$9 trillion. I think I pulled up for 2020.
Yeah, and so when you look at $9 trillion of print money and your inflation isn't there, your relationships aren't necessarily tying together the way that they should. What does that mean moving forward? How are we going to view the next 12 months, the next 18 months as we continue to navigate through this COVID crisis and have to try to continue to prop up the economies? Are we going to need to continue to prop up these economies in relation to, the amount of money that's out there and how we view that money delivery?
Right. Yeah. This is another one that she posted out there about. This was after Ray Dalio. He stated his cash is trash. This is the debt in the companies. I don't know why I pulled that one up. There was another one I saw. So she pulled up a post of hers once Ray Dalio had said cash is trash, but we can see that on the DXY, which showed it. He tweeted it out. Cash is trash, and then after that, it's completely gone down itself over the time frame.
But you look at all world currencies have gone down in value over that time frame. The dollar is consistently lagging behind the overall value across the world economies, and so it's as you look at it in comparison to growth. I've read stuff that says that you're going to look at these other foreign nations outside the United States that aren't based on the dollar, have more continued growth because they were able to devalue the dollar, but it also allowed for their future continued growth to happen over the next 10 years. I don't necessarily buy into that as a mindset. I think that you're going to consistently see the innovation and growth that happens in the United States transfer out. I think you're going to continue to see the want or the need to devalue or have inflation for the dollar moving forward throughout the rest of this year, possibly into next year as well. And that's going to play out for our continued growth, at least is how we look at for our investments.
So if the Fed is just going to keep printing, right? I mean, they've already said that for at least this next year, get us through the crisis. What happens after that? Like at what point in time? And you've brought this up because people are concerned about the debt that the U.S. has. Well, the interest rate that the U.S. is getting, the amount that they're paying out is it's marginally more, but we have 10x the debt.
Yeah, it was something that I read at the year 2000. We had like $6 trillion worth of debt, and not exact numbers right now because I'm going off of memory, but let's just say it was $6 trillion of debt, and our debt payment was $300 billion per year. And then you look at, I think 2 years ago, it was something like $17 trillion or $18 trillion, so 3 times the debt, but our debt payment went from $300 billion a year up to $450 billion a year. And so because the interest rates are so low, it allows for the government to borrow money and have that debt payment be so low in relation. And so that's going to continue, especially through through the near-term time frame where we have low interest rates, where our debt payment doesn't necessarily increase all that much in comparison to the overall debt that we take on. And that's in relation to the GDP and the growth of the GDP. And and how much longer can it continue? I don't know. Is there ever a time frame where we're going to wake up and have to pay the piper, or are we continually kicking the can down the road? And it seems currently that we're kicking the can down the road, and that mode of operation is going to continue, where we kick the can down the road for when does that actually become due? Well, if it becomes due and the value of the dollar is so much lower than what it is right now, then that payment just seems that much less. But is that something that we can continually perpetuate, 20, 30, 40 years from now? I don't know. I'm not.
You don't have the crystal ball?
No crystal ball to be able to say that. I just know that in order to defend myself from that eventuality, you have to try to accumulate the growth that's in excess of where your current inflationary pressures are, and having it in a bank account right now is not going to protect you against the future inflationary rates. You have it in investments, and you and I personally have it in investments in the market to protect from those inflationary pressures. If you're having growth of 10, 20, 30% per year, and the inflation rate for those years are 2 or 3%, then obviously you're coming out ahead, and that's what you continually want to have year over year over year, is that additional growth and that compounding interest of your growth for that time frame.
Right. Yeah, I think nobody can really see what's going to happen. Everybody, when you look at the debt clock, it's just ticking up here. I've never been on this site before. It's just the first one I clicked on. Yeah. But 27, that's a lot.
Well, and the fact is, they say U.S. published national debt versus the truth, and
yeah, I don't know what that whole thing is.
They're probably basing that off of something, and you look at these and it scares you into thinking, each taxpayer shares almost $900,000. Well, is that really indicative of what our share is? And if we were to look at what our government budget is of, let's just say $4 trillion to work in round numbers, and our debt is $27 trillion, obviously it takes quite a few years of the government not using or spending any money and just applying that towards debt to pay off our existing debt.
Yeah.
But when our debt payment is only $400 billion or $500 billion per year, then you swallow that pill and continue to pump the money, because that's what's driving the overall economy. And that's how at least I look at the graphic, or I looked at that video that we posted on the resources for Discord, was how money works and why we have the money in our system, and how we have to look at lending and borrowing as what drives our overall system.
Right. Well, and I think when you look at the debt, the amount of debt here, they can't, they have to implement something to where they can't raise interest rates, because they've taken on, more debt. Their payments, are marginally more than what they were. But if the interest rates were to go up, that would devastate the entire system. So they have to keep interest rates low. But how low can they go?
Well, how long can they keep them this low too?
Right. So when does that change, and how does it change down the road? I think that's probably the next thing that is, in my eyes, that's going to really, rock the boat, to say, down the road. But when does that happen? Is it in 2 years? Is it in 10 years, 20 years? Like you said, how far can they kick that down the road? And I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I think what you have to focus on, at least in the near short term, year to 2 years, is just looking at the fact of right now is we're in a great growth opportunity, and you got to capitalize on the great growth opportunity and evaluate, okay, what does the compounding growth of right now mean? How can that look for 3 years down the road? Because if you do it in comparison of, say, what $1 million was 30 years ago versus what $1 million will be 30 years from now, both of those visions are two different things. Because we look at $1 million right now as that's a good chunk of money. 30 years ago, $1 million was kind of, you could have retired. That was like the end goal for everybody. I made $1 million,
yeah.
and so then you could just check out. You didn't have to do anything anymore in your mind. Well, 30 years from now, what's $1 million going to look like? Or are we looking at, that's basically in essence a $40,000 a year job, or is
it going to be dollars?
Oh,
a million DM coins.
Yeah, you don't know what that exchange is going to be. Is it going to be credits or how are they going to view stuff?
How do they scan my little barcode on my arm to make sure that I have enough money in my account? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Who knows? I mean, basically this conversation was just kind of bring up the idea of cash is trash. Is it really trash? I mean, obviously we still use it. So in that sense, no. But when you look at your overall value of your portfolio, of your life in terms of money, you know, there's probably some good arguments to put out there to make sure that you're hedging against the dollar, especially when we look at the charts and it's looking like in the printing, it's just going to keep going lower in the next 12 to 24 months minimum, I would say. But things can change. We already know they're going to be putting out the next stimulus, right?
The next one, and then possibly one after that again, as we continue to see the new or incoming administration has indicated that they're gonna. This first round is just the down payment, more or less, on the upcoming stimulus that's to be determined here within the next 6 months, I think. And
so if that's their major goal, we have 2 years of some pretty clear paths for them to push stuff through if they really want it.
Oh yeah.
So
I don't know exactly how clear path it is. It's not exactly the overall supermajority that's needed, but it is going to be something that they will be able to get some of the ideas through in short order.
Yeah.
The roadblocks that might have been there are certainly not there right now. And when you evaluate what is cash and how is the trade going to happen, it really creates that the question marks of how much longer can this continue. At least for my mindset, it's going to be continuing here for 12 to 24 month time frame, and we're looking at the possibility of it being extended much further into 2024, 2025 time frame. And as long as it's going good, you might as well capitalize on it while you can, right?
That's right. So I guess that's all we got for today. It was a short one. Well, shorter than normal, but Jeremy and I, we can talk forever. But we'll leave it there, and have a good day.